ultimate fate. He grew up pampered son of a billionaire. He liked to ride horses. His friends from that time described him as a very soft-spoken, not overly religious child. We know he went off to university as a young man in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, and he got some exposure to radical Islamist theory there, but it's exactly right. His first taste of battle came in Afghanistan in the 80s. Now, he was primarily known as the fundraiser.
Nice,
somebody
like
who was
a
helping
campfire.
recruit wealthy Muslims who could help back the Mujahideen. It's interesting that in that era, Bin Laden's interests would seem to have aligned with the U.S. They were both providing money and arms to the Mujahideen, battling against the Soviet occupation. Obviously, whether or not the interests aligned, Bin Laden was already no friend of the U.S., and it took another decade before he was pronouncing fatwas, proclaiming that it was the duty of all Muslims to kill Americans wherever they could find them. But it's clear that in those years, he got this taste of creating a movement, of wanting to create a jihad for Muslims, battling on behalf of Muslims as he saw it. And it was clear even from those early days in Afghanistan, he saw this as a global struggle. So he wanted to fight the fight in Afghanistan. He also had much wider ambitions very early on.
After the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait back in 1990, he in fact wanted to launch a jihad against Iraqis on behalf of all Muslims. The Saudi government took another tack and invited the United States, and as bin Laden saw it, invited in a Western occupation of the land of the two holy places.
This was a hugely important issue for bin Laden. So the Soviets lost in Afghanistan back in 1989. Bin Laden returned to Saudi Arabia. Of course, this was around the time of the First Gulf War. You mentioned Kuwait, and it was bin Laden who was very opposed to the way that the Saudi royal family was aligning itself with the U.S. in that war. He was so critical that he lost his passport. They revoked his citizenship. He was forced to flee. A couple of years later, we find bin Laden in Sudan. And this was another turning point for him, where he became, based on messages and letters that have been tracked over the years based on communications he seemed to become much more extreme. He was already in those years in Sudan in the early 90s, reaching out to extremists in Chechnya, in the Balkans, in other parts of North Africa, already starting to not only have this global ideology and vision for the fight against the far enemy, the United States as he saw it, but also wanting to draw in recruits from all over the world. So he himself is Saudi, Ayman al-Zawahiri is longtime deputy Egyptian. They brought Muslims in from all over the Arab world, but also already thinking big.
And then the establishment of Al-Qaeda, the base, once the Taliban, his allies in Afghanistan, took control of the government there and offered him a place to operate.
That's right. Bin Laden does not have a good track record of West in countries that agree to host him, so he got kicked out of Sudan. And by 1996, he found himself back in Afghanistan. He didn't always have smooth relations with the Taliban. They asked him to lay low. He didn't always respect that, but he was a critical source of financing for the Taliban, so they found a way to work together. It was in those years in the late 90s. Bin Laden was in Afghanistan in 96. He issued a fatwa that U.S. military personnel should be killed by 1998. A fatwa meaning a religious order. Questions over whether he had the authority to do it, but he did it. By 1998, he was saying all Muslims, it is your duty to kill Americans wherever you find them. And then, of course, by 98 came the embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, and the first successful attack that really got the attention of the United States. 224 people killed in those embassy bombings.
Later, the attack on the USS Cole in Aden, and then 9/11.
Then 9/11. But surely he would have continued his most significant attack.
We just have a minute left in this section, Ted.
Okay, I just don't want you to forget the first attack on the World Trade Center.
Back in 1993, that was organized.
93.
Yes, that was organized in part by Al-Qaeda, but in part by operatives here in the United States, and they were tried in federal court and are still serving time there. And yes, that was the first attack on the United States in 1993.
Absolutely right, and lots of questions about what role bin Laden may or may not have played in that early Trade Center attack, but that pattern already emerging of providing inspiration, if not direct tools and means to accomplish an attack.
Stay with us, Mary Louise Kelly. Also, of course, Ted Koppel. We're going to find out what the death of Osama bin Laden will mean for
tired. I'm
Al-Qaeda
gonna look
and its
for
various affiliates around the world.
rest area.
NPR's Mike Schuster
I'm
will
gonna
also
get off
join
and
us.
put up
Stay
my
with us.
hammock
I'm Neil
and
Cummins. You're listening to special
relax.
coverage from NPR News.
And indeed, thank you so much for joining us for this special coverage from NPR News on Radio IQ. We are not airing Fresh Air today because of obvious reasons, this continuing coverage from NPR News. And we will resume our regular schedule here on Radio IQ beginning at 1 o'clock with Here and Now. Then Talk of the Nation is a special program today at 2 o'clock. We will continue the coverage throughout the day. You'll hear different perspectives from NPR News, from the BBC, and other news and information sources that you rely on with every time you tune to Radio IQ. So we're glad you're with us, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It'll be partly sunny for this afternoon. An isolated shower here or there, mostly in far southwestern Virginia. Highs most places near 80 today. Highs in the New River Valley in far southwestern Virginia closer to 75. It's 1240. This is Radio
Toronto,
IQ.
Virginia. So we're near Christiansburg or something. Christiansburg, Virginia. But I'm going to go to the rest area. I'm going to go put up a hammock in between some trees behind the rest area and relax. So I guess I'll let you go while you still have some battery.